Hey everyone, today we're going to be talking about tempo and why it's so important. Now tempo, it is a bit of a buzzword in League of Legends in the community, so I wanted to start by defining what tempo actually is. Tempo is basically initiative or the first move. So if you have tempo, you have the first move. It is your turn to make a play on the map, but it doesn't last forever. Your tempo gets used up or invested when you make a decision, and that decision can be heading bot tower for plates, taking enemy jungle camps, doing a neutral objective, roaming, deciding to freeze a wave, anything like that. Understanding tempo and being able to interrupt enemy tempo and generating your own tempo are powerful skills to have at your disposal. And tempo is quite deeply embedded in competition in general. You will see this term used in other games and even in traditional sports. For example, in tennis, you have the tempo advantage if it's your serve, and it allows you to dictate the pace of the point and win much more frequently than you would lose. Just like in League, if you have the first move, you control the pace of the game, and you can confidently make plays. So let's start with generating our own tempo. If anyone has seen my wave states or my roaming support fundamentals videos, they're going to be linked in the description below. The reason that we want to crash bot wave before roaming is to generate tempo. The enemy is going to have to react to that bot wave under their tower, and we'll be denying a wave for the enemy team to use to pressure our ADC. So if we kill that wave, they have no wave, our ADC is going to be safe in the near future, and then we can roam without counterplay. If, in that same example, the enemy support tries to roam on that bad wave state when the wave is under their tower and the following waves are going to push away from them, then their ADC is very susceptible to getting punished. So a lot of generating early tempo is going to be about crashing waves. You can crash and use that tempo to base, or you can crash and use that tempo to roam. So, shoving waves is going to help generate tempo, but I don't want you guys to just mindlessly perma-shove waves. That is not going to do anything if you don't know how to use tempo. If you have tempo, but there is nothing to do with it, because there are no neutrals on the map, or junglers are on camps, or it's just too early in the game, then you're potentially just extending in the lane, which could be dangerous in the 2v2, or you're preventing yourself from being able to freeze and punish 2v2. And sometimes, of course, you're not going to be able to even shove and generate that window of tempo. What I do want you guys to do is when you want to leave lane, crash first. Crash and then base, or crash and then roam. Now the next point, and I'm still going to be focusing on the early game for this, is to be cancelling enemies' tempo. So this is something that my students will have heard me say a lot of times. If you get to cancel the enemy ADC's recall, this can be absolutely game-changing. It doesn't matter how poorly the early lane goes. If the enemy ADC can't recall, then they can't heal up, get full health, get full mana, they can't spend their gold, they're going to be locked into the lane, and it's going to hamper their pressure, it's going to prevent their snowball. So just understand that their tempo, the enemy ADC's tempo, is much more important than yours. If you want to find a base, but the enemy ADC is, shoving a wave and then looking to find a base themselves, go be a psycho and cancel their base. Now, of course, tempo is not only going to apply to the early game. When you're behind in the mid to late, you can look to punish the enemy's tempo by potentially sneaking or forcing Baron when they've been hanging around on the map for a long time with low resources and a lot of unspent gold. So you need to develop a sense for when you have bad tempo and you need to fix it, or when the enemy has bad tempo and you can punish it. For this first example here, I'm the Rel, and I'm coming back to lane from base, and we're going to look to shove this wave and generate myself some tempo to roam without my ADC getting punished. And so that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to shove this wave, and then I'm going to move up, and I'm going to start roaming. And then we'll just have a quick look at what I can get done here, because there's going to be a fight, and in solo queue there are going to be plenty of random fights, so don't be surprised if you do move towards mid-jungle, something is going to happen. Unfortunately, I was a little bit too late there. I'm going to hang around, and we end up getting the kill on the Brand as well. Now I'm going to go back, and I want to show you guys what Senna actually ends up doing, because this should have been a simple crash wave into tower, and then I go and roam, and then there's no counterplay. However, Senna decides to try and hold the wave. Now, what my ADC should do here is obviously just push her off. She's not allowed to do this. I can go roam. Xerath's job is not to roam. Xerath can easily force this wave under tower, but anyway, he didn't. And so what Senna is doing here is she's pretty much investing her own tempo by just holding a freeze. This is quite a big investment from her. She's investing her health. She's investing her time. She is constantly donating information to us by being on the map and just holding a wave like this. And this is going to give the rest of our team a lot of freedom, right? my ADC can confidently clear out this ward. I can confidently roam up here. We just have absolute freedom on the map here, a very expensive decision for her to be making. However, it can be a good idea to just maximize the 2v2 lane. And the later that the game goes on, the less you want to do something like this, because the more counterplay there is. And so what Senna could have done with her tempo instead is let this wave crash and then potentially look to match my roam, although her champ is going to be much worse at it than mine. Or she could look to just let this crash, let the Ezreal catch that wave with her, and then they can look to shove next wave and try to force me back into lane. But this is her investment of tempo, this is my investment of tempo, and prioritizing shoving and roaming and pressuring is going to be much more important when neutrals are on the map, as a rule of thumb. For this next example here, I am the Rakan, and obviously very chunked. What they are going to look to do here is crash and base. Now obviously I want to base personally and individually, but like I said, the enemy ADC's tempo is much more important than your own. And so I'm not just going to base here, I'm going to run forwards and look to cancel the enemy ADC's recall. If they're greedily recalling around here, I'll easily cancel it. If they're greedily recalling in one of these bushes, I can cancel it. So I walk up, you can see my intent. I'm looking to cancel the enemy ADC's base. And unfortunately, for some reason, I just decide to Q the Xerath. I should have found a Q to cancel the enemy ADC's recall here. And so I fail in that regard, but now I'm going to change my priority, right? I realized that the enemy got their recall off, and so I'm going to look to hard shove this, to desperately try and generate some of our own tempo before the Vayne comes back to lane. So then I can look to base and I can look to roam. So that's what's going to happen. We're going to crash this as fast as possible. I'm going to ensure that this wave crashes and that Xerath doesn't hold this wave. And because this is earlier in the game, right? This is only 5 minutes. The Herald isn't even on the map. It's much harder to take Dragon. I'm more scared of the freezing option by the Xerath here. So I'm going to escort this into the tower. And then once I'm satisfied it has crashed, then I'm going to back off, find my own base, and now I have generated myself a roam timer. Because this wave is going to be pushing into the Kai'Sa, and so Kai'Sa is more than happy to just sit bot and collect the stacking wave by herself, and I can go and pressure the map. And so that's what's going to happen. I'm probably waiting for an item. I move out of base. I see some activity going on around mid. I'm going to sprint towards this area. And then I'm going to skirmish. And in this situation, my ADC decided to roam as well. I'm not really sure why ADCs are roaming in so many of my games. That's not what should happen. But if my ADC was down here, I'm sure you can appreciate that she can comfortably collect all of these minions. And even with her roam, she doesn't end up losing too much. And then she's back here. And now that I'm back bot, I have used my tempo. It is no longer my turn to make a play, so I'm going to look to generate tempo in the near future again. If I can crash another wave and then peel off and go and roam, great. But right now I wouldn't look to go and roam towards mid, because then my ADC would be left stranded with an awkward wave state, pushing away from her. Really tough for her to collect minions. Now for this next example, I am the Braum, and what Kai'Sa wants to look to do is shove this wave, go home, and spend her gold. Okay, so they're going to clear the wave out. My ADC ends up dying. We get a kill on the back end. Cool. I'm going to let the wave crash. I'm going to let the wave aggro onto the tower so that I'm not tanking this wave the entire time. And they're going to run forwards and look to cancel the enemy ADC's base. And this is something that you can do. Just understanding how greedy people are, that they really just want to get their recall off. What I'm going to do here, I see that she's on a ward. I'm going to pretend that I don't know she's on a ward. I'm going to sweep out this ward over here. I'm going to hit this a bunch. I'm going to walk forwards. I'm going to pretend like their plan is going to work, right? Obviously their plan here, Blitz is going to block my Q and allow Kai'Sa to get her base off. However, I have other ideas. I'm going to walk forwards at the last possible second, right before she's going to get the base off. I ignite her. And so this might look really silly, but I've cancelled her base. She doesn't get to spend her gold. And so now if we look at the gold values down here, she has more gold than my ADC, but she has so much unspent gold that right now we are so much stronger. Spent gold, my ADC is miles ahead of her. And so if I get to keep her in lane like this, not full health, low mana, huge amount of unspent gold, then she practically can't play the game. And so I'm more than happy to invest my Ignite to achieve something like that. And so we'll just play this out a little bit. I'm going to walk forwards again, play this mind game, pretend that I'm going to look for the Kai'Sa and then just cancel Blitz's base. Not that relevant. He should know that this was warded because I ignited the Kai'Sa, but anyway, the ADC is the most important target to disrupt tempo. And so now I can do one of two things. I can stay in lane, keep shoving, keep pressuring the Kai'Sa, prevent her from ever getting a free recall without losing waves. Or I can use this window of tempo that I have generated to go and pressure the rest of the map, to base or to roam or to do something else. Now what I'm going to decide to do is choose the roaming and the pressuring option because Herald is approaching in the near future. I value that objective very highly. If this was earlier in the game, if this was 5 minutes and before, then I would probably make the greedier 2v2 option of just punishing Kai'Sa in the lane. And so we'll just have a quick look at that happening. I'm going to base, I'm going to come out of base, I'm going to sprint towards mid, I'm going to link up with my mid and my jungler, I'm going to facilitate Herald, and me being here is going to make all the difference in us getting this objective. Because I have the tempo advantage, right? I'm here well before the enemy blitz can be anywhere near. And so what should happen in a situation like this is we comfortably win. If they contest, we should kill them with this numbers advantage. The execution doesn't go quite as planned. My jungler got a little bit tunneled on just hitting the Herald and not killing people. But either way, my presence here, my tempo advantage, netted us the Herald, and then we're able to get out, and that's job well done. Okay, so I've invested my tempo. My entire team has invested their tempo, right? We've all gotten chunked, we've all used cooldowns. We have to exit with our tail between our legs, and now it's the enemy's turn, right? Now they have tempo over us, now they can shove waves, now they can potentially counter jungle or look to do dragon, and so there's going to be a bit of ebb and flow with tempo. So it was our turn, now it's their turn, and then once they end up making this play, right, now they've used up their tempo. And doing a neutral objective, especially early on, is always going to be a big investment of time. So now it's our turn again. And what we're going to do while it is our turn, we're going to get some bot prior, we're going to shove bot wave, and then we can eventually control bot river. And they have no counterplay to this because their tempo is really bad. And then my jungler makes a play and I get to move up here. So there's a sense of ebb and flow with tempo. Okay, in this example, this is from the perspective of Sona, which is one of my gold students. And we're in a pretty rough lane, and we've been poked out a lot, and we're getting shoved in. So we're not going to get that neat and tidy crash into base with perfect tempo. That's okay. The next best thing is trying to find a reasonable window to base ourselves. And so that's going to be after a wave has crashed under our tower. So this is going to be a pretty reasonable time to base right now, because we don't want to just hang around in lane, slowly bleeding out. And so even though it's not a neat and tidy crash into the tower, into base, this is still the best long-term decision, because even if we lose some minions in the near future, if we find our base here and then, you know, they start slow shoving and we miss a couple minions, that's okay. We'll come back and we'll be able to catch that wave, and we'll have full health, full mana, gold spent, and potentially look to cancel their recall as well, because they need to find a base as well. So anyway, unfortunately what happens, our ADC cancels their base, and then we embrace reality and respond by cancelling our own, which is reasonable. And then we're going to hang around in lane, get poked out a bit more. And my student knows that we can use our jungler's proximity to help fix our tempo. We don't have to just go for a mindless gank. And so we can see with our body language, with our pings, we immediately communicate what we want to do, what is important. It's wave state, it's finding that tempo recall. And that's exactly what we do. So this is really good to see. And if we just followed up on this mindless, like running forwards and finding a Q or trying to do something that isn't really possible here, and we fail to shove this wave fast enough, then it could get really awkward really quickly if the wave just gets stuck up here, and then we could die or just have to spend more time. So we crash the wave well enough, and then we're going to go home, fix our own tempo. And the enemies, they don't really have a concept of tempo or of good base timings. And so they're still really, really pressured to find a base, right? All of this gold. Conditions are very poor right now. So we're going to sprint back to lane and try to cancel the enemy ADC's base. And if we're able to do it, then it's just absolutely devastating. Then Caitlyn's going to have to hang around and then be susceptible to a gank and try to shove up when she's really low. Unfortunately, we don't have boots, we don't have our E for some move speed, and so we just barely don't get here in time to cancel her base. It happens, it is what it is, you can see the intent is there. But now we have options, right? Because they absolutely did not crash a wave into base. And so now they have a really bad wave state. They don't have good tempo. They have to come back here and fix this, and they're going to lose out minions anyway. So we have a couple of options, right? We can either hold a freeze, deny 1.5 to 2 waves, which is definitely a compelling argument. in this instance, it's not 8 minutes. Herald is not on the map. We're an enchanter and we're a scaling enchanter, so there's more incentive to be playing to maximize lane 2v2 than to be shoving and roaming. But of course, we can also shove and roam anyway, and Aphelios with his blue gun, he'd be able to shove this wave really fast, deny this entire wave under tower, maybe get a plate, but have some more pressure as well. And so that's what the decision is going to end up being. We're going to shove instead. But we have this decision to make. We're able to deny these minions because of better fundamentals, because of understanding tempo better than the opponents. Now for this next example, it's not from the perspective of anyone in particular. I went and found a random bronze game, and I wanted to have a look in the mid to late game to see an example of some poor understanding of tempo. So what's going to happen here is there's going to be a big fight. Of course, this is going to be nothing to do with tempo. This is just going to be fighting and execution. Okay. And so red team is eventually going to win this fight. And what happens on the back end, we're going to take red team's perspective now. What's happened is they've killed the entire enemy team. Okay, great. You guys have a bunch of gold. You guys are low in health and mana a little bit as well. And so we're going to take two perspectives here. The first perspective is that Ezreal is going to look to fix his tempo immediately, recall, heal up, spend his gold, come back out on the map. Great. He's not going to be able to get punished at all. What the Nasus is going to do is he hung around and he got some fruits, and now he's going to run mid. And he's going to get this mid wave, and that would be as much tempo as he has. He's not allowed to do anything more. That's what he spent his tempo on doing. Because now the Draven and the Lee are coming back out onto the map, especially with the Hextech gates. But Nasus doesn't have this concept in his mind, and so he's just going to get mid wave and then run forwards. And then try to siege mid tower by himself when his entire team is still off of the map, coming back out of base. And now he's going to get punished by the Draven and the Lee. So we can approach this example from two perspectives, right? Going back to the Nasus and the Lee, be like Ezreal here, fix your tempo, prevent the enemy from being able to do anything, right? Because from Ezreal's perspective, he comes back out full health, full mana, gold spent, and then he's not punishable. He can do whatever he wants on the map right now. And then if you're blue team and you see the enemy overstay their tempo, then you can look to punish decisively. You can think to yourself, wait, this guy hasn't based yet. What is he still doing on the map? He's by himself. I know that his entire team is coming out of base, or they're still dead, or whatever. Let's punish him. And that's exactly what happens. He ends up dying. And there are going to be plenty of examples of this if you keep an eye out for it, especially in lower elos. Now this is from the perspective of my gold student from the Rakan, and something's going to happen that I see all the time in lower elo. Everyone just ARAMs and tries to brute force mid and has no concept of how to cleanly snowball a game, and you're just going to wait until you get flanked or you overstay your tempo and get punished by the enemy. So let's just play this out a little bit. We're going to fight around mid. I don't care how the fight goes. Just going to speed past that. We end up killing a bunch of them. Cool. And then what blue team is going to do here is they're going to look to go for the end. And they're just not going to quite have the damage to do it. And they're going to have overstayed. And they're going to get punished. And they're not going to realize it in time. And then they're just all going to die. And then the enemy team is right back in the game. They're going to get a bunch of shutdowns. If you are in the lower elos, I would say platinum and below, be very careful when people are clueless about what to do and everyone just ends up ARAMing for an extended period of time. Eventually something's going to go wrong. You keep ARAMing and the enemy is so close to their fountain, they're going to have full health, full mana, and they're going to have their gold spent, and you're just asking to eventually die. Fix that tempo, find a window to base, go take some other towers. There are 3 lanes in the game. Thanks for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed. Big thank you to all of my Patreons over here. I really couldn't do this without you. The links for coaching, for Patreon, for my School of Support Discord server, for socials, they're all going to be linked in the description below. Any and all support is greatly appreciated.